Hi, I'm Bob Roth, managing partner and co-founder of Cypress Home Care Solutions. Since 1994, we've been helping older adults in the Phoenix community age gracefully and safely in the place they call home. Since 2014, I've been bringing you Health Futures, Taking Stock in You, a show dedicated to helping you live a longer, healthier, and happier life. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and enjoy the show. You're listening to Health Futures. I'm Bob Roth, and I am really pleased to have with me today, I've got Mary Furlong. And Mary is a friend of mine, a friend that I made several years back. There was and there still is, an organization called Aging 2.0. And Mary, you and I met, I think it was about 2016, 2017 at one of those events. But I am really excited about having you here in the studio with me. Welcome to Health Futures.
Great to be here, and congratulations on all your good work there.
Well, thank you. And you know, you're an icon in our industry. And, you know, I enjoyed meeting you the very first time, and I've been following you for a long time. And, you know, to really set the stage here for our listeners, can you really give us a little bit about your background? Because you date into this space going back into the 1980s. And we started in our home care business in 1994. And as I tell a lot of listeners, and in my writings I got into this space through my experience of being a caregiver for my mom. And that was in 1985. And in 1985, there was no such thing as assisted living or in-home supportive care companies like the Cypress Home Care Solutions. So, Mary, I would love for us to kind of set the stage here and for you to give me and our listeners an idea about you and your background and how you got into the space.
So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started 3 companies. One of my friends said, "You build companies the way other people bake cakes." Thought that was kind of a compliment. But I go back to being the daughter of an entrepreneur and who wanted me to be a professor, which I became. I went to Catholic University. A colleague came up to me and said, "Would you like to write a book called Computers for Kids Over 60?" I was 30 then. This is 1983.
Wow.
And I said, yes, because I need to publish. So let's get lemonade and cookies and flip charts and Commodore VIC-20s and TV sets. And we went around to senior centers and nursing homes. We had a student who was 100 who said, "I can't see and I can't hear, but I love what you're doing." What I learned in that moment was it's the sense of efficacy, spiritual efficacy that you want to give to older adults. So we did the workshops. We wrote the book. Addison Wesley published the book. I actually have a picture of the book. It's kind of fun. And then I fell in love with the older adults. Like many in this field, I was very influenced by my maternal grandmother in Virginia, who held court on the front porch and built a sense of community. And I saw social isolation was a need. So anyway, I looked for funding for 2 years, went to 200 meetings, never give up on your idea. I finally met Lloyd Morissette from who started Sesame Street and at the Markle Foundation. And Lloyd was trying, just a second. 3, 2, 1. Lloyd was trying to fund an entrepreneur who cared about older adults and technology the way he had looked at the youth market in technology. So he gave me $35,000, and then my program officer suggested I double it. And we created a research project, because what did you do as a university professor? You did research. So we created 5 SeniorNet centers and an online network called SeniorNet. And then that grew over 10 years to 100 centers around the country.
Wow.
And the first social network for older adults. Now, mind you, this is before AOL. So my email is furlong@AOL, which I take a lot of pride in. And I saw Steve Case this year. He was surprised I still had AOL, but there are 35 million people 65 plus on AOL. So anyway, I ran that for 10 years. So I got to learn about the needs and interests of older adults in technology.
Can you give us an idea on years that we're talking about? You said 10 years. So 1983, and where are we at?
Well, the book was 83 to 85.
Okay.
We found funding in 86, and we ran it from 86 to 96.
Got it.
And IBM was really helpful. They had older adults that they were retiring. And so we had 20 IBM centers around the country in cities where there's IBM, like Dallas and San Jose and Florida and New York. And so these IBM volunteers were really part of the workforce that we had, volunteer group that we had. And Pac Bell and AT&T, others were trying to show that telecommunications was an area of interest. So believe it or not, I went to France. I gave one of the first talks about telecommunications when Minitel was in France. So I was very much an early adopter of digital media technology and the longevity market. This is the same time Alan Kay at Apple was experimenting with young children and older adults to create the Macintosh. So John Scully, who you probably remember,
I do.
he he gave us technology, gave us Macintoshes. I have the original Mac in my garage, and Apple IICs to look at user interface design. So what we learned from this 10-year experiment really was that older people want romance. We had over 20 marriages. They want productivity tools. They want to, number one, is stay in touch with their children and grandchildren. So all of the technologies were tools that they could use. So just as Apple was introducing technology into the schools, we were kind of introducing technology into the older adult marketplace. And, we had well-off older people who were in Boca, and we had people who were learning and needing to learn in the settlement houses of New York. So it was a great experience for 10 years. And we had Microsoft and many other software companies that were interested in what software would older adults use. So I did that for 10 years. And then it's very hard to get funding for a nonprofit after you've had a major funder. It's a little bit like being in one venture firm versus another. So I went up to the launch of Windows 95. I came back, this was 1996. I had calls from venture capitalists who wanted to invest in the market. They thought older adults and technologies were one of the big ideas in the market. So I financed a company called ThirdAge Media, which was part of the CBS Sportsline, CBS Marketplace. Viacom was one of our big funders. And then we endowed the nonprofit. And I had to do that because Lloyd, my mentor, was retiring from the foundation. And it turned out so I've always understood for-profit, nonprofit business models, not always easy to navigate, but that's a whole other discussion. I'll turn it back to you because we can talk about social impact investing today, very different than it was then.
Sure. No, and I really appreciate how you set the table here. And I mean, you were right on the very beginning stages. I mean, I think, going back to 1983 and then 1986 to 1996, being there with Windows 95. I mean, many of the people that are watching and listening to this are going to say, wow, I don't remember that, but I do. And I do remember, how we were, drinking from a fire hose back then. And really, the internet was brand new. And I love that you still have that AOL email address. And you are definitely one of the legends and certainly one of the pioneers in really taking aging services and bringing that technology and innovation to it. And that really will set up this next one. And that is really, from our community to the marketplace. You've helped over $100 million in venture and corporate support towards longevity economy. And you have authored Turning Silver into Gold onto the boomer marketplace. So my question to you is, what's the line between responsibility and catalyzing a longevity market and over commercializing aging? And where have you seen that line crossed or honored, so to speak?
Well, I think I need to fill in a gap and then answer that question.
Sure.
So my second company was ThirdAge.
Right.
And I ran that for 7 years with a very talented team of people. We sold that to Ancestry. And then I had a job possibility in a nonprofit. I wasn't qualified, and I didn't get the job, but I said they should have dating. But then I gave a talk at Santa Clara with David Halberstam on social impact of technology, and they offered me a position at Santa Clara. I've always kept a university position, so I still teach women leadership in the business school at Santa Clara. Very privileged to do that in the summers. And then I started my third company, which is MFA. And that started with a newsletter, now podcast, and a consulting practice, and then 2 conferences. So I went to this conference. I mean, I met Brad Vail for lunch from J&J, and he said, really, because the dean asked me to raise money for the business school. I said, well, really, he said, we just funded 3 companies that came out of the Stanford Biodesign competition. And I said, well, because I first thought, well, I'll go to my tech companies, but it turned out other departments in the universities, somebody had Microsoft, somebody had Intel, somebody had Apple. So then I thought, well, why not create this competition? So for 23 years now, we've created a competition where we've got some of the best business plans and ideas that have come into the market. Some of those companies are 100 million in revenue and have sold, and some very exciting entrepreneurs. So it turns out I like sailing more than I like going fast. And so I'm part of the Golden Gate Yacht Club. We won the America's Cup. In fact, we're having a party there on Sunday with a lot of our clients. So I follow the global marketplace because the deals are coming in from around the country. So let's go back to that question again about what nonprofits have is a lot of trust and insight about the customer. And we certainly had that when we were at SeniorNet. But we also had that when we were at ThirdAge, and we partnered with companies like Quaker Oats, where I know you have experience. Yes. And one of the things we did was we tried these virtual campaigns, 30 days to lower your cholesterol. And we were able to get customer insight from those campaigns and change behavior. So we've always been interested in niche communities in media, and how do we really look at what are the needs of the customer? So what is unlocking the customer journey? And so, what entrepreneurs, you can get an engineer who's the top person out of MIT or Carnegie Mellon or Stanford, whose mother or grandmother has an issue and they want to do something in the longevity market, but they don't necessarily know how to partner with an aging services provider. They don't know the ecosystem. They don't know the culture. And yet, what I can tell you I've never been bored in my work, because the opportunity to reinstantiate the role of older people as leaders in society and give them tools to be more productive and creative has never been more profound. So it's really, for me, not about the technology, it's about the talent of the older people.
100%. And you know what, Mary? We're coming up on a break here, and I think there's a great segue right now. Let's take a break and leave off at that. And just for our listeners, MFA is Mary Furlong and Associates, right?
Yeah, maryfurlong.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maryfurlong.com. And just so everyone knows, in the healthcare vertical, we always throw out these acronyms. So I wanted to make sure we got that one right. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. We're back. And I've got Mary Furlong here from Mary Furlong and Associates, right, Mary? I have that correct?
Right. We have a newsletter, Living, and we have 2 podcasts, Living Longer, Smarter, Better, which is just to help you live longer, with Fred Fishkin, who is CBS Radio. We work together at CBS.
I love it.
My second company. And then we have Longevity Deal Talk. So when companies do deal, we try to cover the deals in the market.
Well, I love it. So, Mary, you said this in the first segment that we just shot and we just did. You talked about having events, and, that's part of the thing that I admire about you, because you bring a lot to the aging services ecosystem. And what you bring is you bring a lot of innovation and technology to the aging services space. And it could be anything from home care to senior living, or just for those that are trying to age by themselves at home in the best way they can. So I would love for you to share with us, where have you evolved today? You shared with us, your background in terms of ThirdAge, and then prior to that, what you were doing over at SeniorNet, and you were right there at the very beginning. And you, like I said, when I introduced you, I'm just so excited to have you here in the studio. You are one of the pioneers, one of the leaders, one of the individuals that's helping us shape utilizing tech and innovation in the aging services world.
So let me try and give you a topic sentence for your listeners. The internet was a very powerful time when the internet was introduced. Longevity today, with the boomers turning 80 next year, is an incredibly important concept. And many people are looking at that concept. Caregiving, a subset of that market, $8.3 trillion longevity market. We are an omni-media company, and that we have events, we have newsletters, we have podcasts, and we have a private client practice. I am so proud of the portfolio that I have. It's never been more market leading, and it's providing solutions that are allowing people to age in place at home, enhance what's going on in senior communities. And what I love about our clients is watching how they go to market. So we started our Longevity Venture Summit. It's every June, usually in Berkeley or San Francisco. And when you look at the entrepreneurs that have come out of that, people like Pet Plan Insurance, older people that have pets, if they get, you see my trees in the background, if I have a tree that I need to take care of, that's an unexpected expense as you get older and age in place at home. Same thing with your pet that needs care. And so pet insurance was prominent in the UK, but not in the US. So Natasha and Chris Ashton became two of the most successful entrepreneurs that we've ever worked with. In fact, they're coming back next June as a sponsor.
Love it.
So we've been able to ethnographically learn from the audience, both at SeniorNet and ThirdAge and through my portfolio. So let's talk about today. So about 7 years ago, we went to a conference on caregiving in Washington that Nancy Lamont of AARP was putting together. And I said, this is groundbreaking. And most of the people there were only a few that were corporate and entrepreneurs, mostly inside of the Washington in the first year, some celebrities and so forth. We began to produce that conference. So that's the Longevity Innovation Conference. So value creation, according to venture capitalist Steve Jurvetson, turns on three things: demographics, which we know, technology, which is so exciting right now, and the regulatory environment, which is an ever-changing dynamic from morning to afternoon to night, right?
100%.
So having this conference in Washington with the head of aging from New York, Greg Olson, having Michelle from Florida, having the head of aging in Maryland, having the stakeholders at AARP, at US Aging, at Age Tech, it's the time where we have to have the policymakers in the room. And now there are reimbursement codes for caregiving training. There are reimbursement codes for mobility and fall prevention. So bringing 220 people together in a room at the National Press Club, which happens to be where I launched SeniorNet many years ago at the National Press Club. And I always bring the media, whatever the media landscape is. My friend Myrna Blythe, who ran AARP Media, but ran More Magazine, ran Lady Goes Home Journal, she's doing our media panel on the future of media. And she's in her 80s. She's a little bit older than me, but she's brighter than me by far, and clearly another mentor. So having this small group of people at the National Press Club where we can look at the Richard Louie from MSNBC is going to do a panel for us. It's about the code. What are the changing codes for reimbursement? And I think there's a real sense here, if we're going to keep America as healthy as we can keep them, we have to empower them with technology. How many of us have a phone here that checks our blood sugar, checks our blood pressure?
Right.
And so that's our conference in December. JP Morgan has 70,000 investors in San Francisco. We always have a small event for our clients in San Francisco We're happening to be at an innovation center this year on AI and innovation. So what's happened in San Francisco is the AI entrepreneurs have moved into the Twitter building, and then global universities are coming to San Francisco. Vanderbilt just came to San Francisco. We're working with the Hanway Innovation Center. That's where our event will be, which is from Korea. I just met with the Italians who are doing work on the Sardinians and blue zones. And so there are these corporations, universities, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, all coming to the Bay Area looking at AI, innovation, and financing. And digital health is a core part of that, and age tech is a core part of that. So twice in my career, once when I saw the internet in the early days, and now with longevity and AI and age tech, I feel like it's the most exciting day to wake up today and to get to do this kind of work.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And I couldn't think of a more exciting time. I haven't been doing this as long as you have, but my family's been doing it for 31 years. And now is the most exciting time to be in the aging service world. So I want to back up and talk about your meetings in Washington at the Press Club. And you talk about the code. And here's something that most Americans don't know. And you know this, and I live it every single day. Americans aren't prepared for long-term care supports. And what do I mean by supports? I'm talking about care in the home or care in a facility. They are under the misguidance that Medicare is going to pay for all this, and they don't. So Mary's talking about codes because it's really important for us to find who are some of the payer sources for this, and how can we pay for long-term care support. So, I love that you're there in DC. I get a chance to go once, sometimes twice to DC to march on the Capitol, to really, be out there advocating for older adults. I do it, for home care. I do it for home health and hospice. We need them, and it's crazy. The market basket for home health over the last 16 years, it's up 1.24%. When you got senior living communities like assisted and skilled nursing and rehab that have had 30 to 40% increases. So Washington is wanting to have home healthcare companies do more with a whole lot less. So we're gravitating to technology. We're gravitating to innovation. And just in my own community and within my own home care agency, we're using artificial intelligence to do a lot of the repetitive and redundant tasks. And we have machine learning doing all that so that we can be more relational in our encounters with our caregivers, more relational in our encounters with our clients and their families. So I love that you're working with these codes. I'm working with an Israeli company that's a startup that is doing virtual care management. And guess what? CMS has introduced these new codes to do that. And the nice thing about this is because CMS has introduced these new codes, we can go to the consumer, our ultimate client that we're serving, and say, look, we're going to provide in-home supportive care, but we're going to put this extra layer, this clinical support layer on top of it, but it's not going to cost you any money. So it's really imperative that we collectively need to empower our teams that are out there to impart to our legislators that we need some assistance to help Americans age. And I love that you're doing that, Mary.
That's right. And, the world, we lived through COVID. We were very successful in COVID because we did our conferences virtually. God bless the team that kind of put all that together. But in March of this year, when things were very uncertain, and the key word you hear in business today is uncertainty, I went to the NIC conference and I heard a great speaker talk about future of senior housing. And I said, well, you must be real excited at this outcome. He said, well, there's some variables. One variable is interest rates, right? Second is tariffs. A third is staffing and the changes around staffing. And the fourth is the regulatory environment. So those are headwinds we have to face.
Big
So
time.
then I added boot camps to my June conference, and I did it at the last minute, kind of drove the team a bit crazy. I said, we have to do this because entrepreneurs have to find workarounds when they go to market. And I love watching Ted Fisher and Ageless Innovation and Carrie Shaw and Embodied Labs and Go
Oh,
Go Grandparent
I
and
love all
Posit
of them.
Science.
Yep.
Yeah, all wonderful, and get set up. And I watch what happens. And I said, let's do a boot camp on go-to-market strategies today. So when we go to Washington, and there's no additional charge for this, we have the latest boot camps. And so what people are doing to go to market today. I have a client, low cost hearing aids. They're in Arizona, Audion,
Right.
100 million plus in revenue. We've already helped them do a deal with a nonprofit organization. They've already done deals with most of the major retail chains. So understanding that Go Grandparent knows a lot about the older adult consumer because they're driving them around. So it's not a surprise to me the state director wants a 20-year deal or 30-year deal with Go Grandparent. And so if you understand that for-profit companies and entrepreneurs are going to succeed because they bet the farm on this, essentially. They believe in the mission and they bet the farm. And so they're going to find, they might go, I'm going to San Francisco and having a party at the Yacht Club on Sunday because I have a new venture studio in Cyprus that is funding in the area of social isolation. So I have a client in social isolation partnering with that venture group in San Francisco. A lot happens at the Yacht Club, same place we won the America's Cup. It's the Golden Gate Yacht Club.
I love it.
And so if you can everyone has had to turn to innovation more. And so nonprofits are more willing to innovate. For-profits are more willing to understand the cadence and trust needed to respect what the nonprofit board wants, what the nonprofit members do, and how to work with them. But everyone has to be faster. So I had a student this summer that I brought AI into my women in leadership class, but I had a guy in the class, and he was using AI as a sales tool to drive his business. He won a contract with a major hotel chain, and he won a contract with an airport. I said, could you come to the Washington and teach us how to use AI in the sales process? So this is how fast AI is moving into the marketplace. And so Lori Orlov's doing a great briefing on AI and aging, and this will be a central theme in all that we do. But it's not just that. It might be how to have an exit strategy, how to go to market with a healthcare organization, where is brain health today and who are the stakeholders around brain health. So we always do these boot camps because whatever worked 6 months ago may not necessarily work today because the
100%.
reimbursements are changing. And also, we're so privileged to work with NIA, and they have a $160 million fund. 60% of their grantees are focused on brain health. And so we just did a podcast on this week with Posit Science and Dr. Mike Roizen from the Cleveland Clinic. And so learning about these new initiatives, that's what our conferences try to do. And look at how many conferences that happened this week. There was Smash in Vegas. There was Health with 12,000 people in Vegas. And we all are on LinkedIn looking at what are the key insights that people are getting from week to week.
And we had the Home Care Association of America, too, this past week. You know what? We're up against a break, Mary. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to expand on a couple of things you talked about, and then I want to really get a sense from you where you see we're going to go into the future. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. We're back. Mary, thank you for walking us through this. And really, I love these events that you do and these webinars that you do. And, you're really out there, bringing innovation to this aging service space. And one of the things you talked about senior housing. And, one of the challenges, and you and I know a lot of people in common, and Louis Tannenbaum is one that I've known for years. And he's been advocating for, obviously, not just senior housing, but senior housing that is ADA compliant. And, a not known fact that most Americans don't realize is that less than 5% of the homes in this country are ADA compliant, and less than 1% will be able to take a wheelchair through the doorways and navigating through a home. So these are some of the challenges that we're dealing with, and we're not building enough houses anymore. So home modifications are something that is really near and dear, and that's something that I like to think that HME and DME should probably be partnering with home remodeling companies, because let's face it, most Americans that are 65 and older want to age right where they're at, and they would like to do that, but sometimes the environment doesn't present the way that they can do so. So I love these innovations, and we can put a lot of things into the home. But I want you to expand a little bit on that, because I know that you're meeting with companies, and you certainly are. You've got your ear to the ground, and you're seeing a lot in this area, in this space.
I love listening. Monday, I went to a wonderful place, a Vivillon in San Rafael, and I saw their art studio, their balance studio, their wonderful restaurant, the healthcare community downstairs, Kaiser down the street, and affordable housing on the top floor. I thought this is kind of where Restoration Hardware new restaurant meets senior center. So I love seeing a PACE program. I love that kind of innovation. And I really, the fact they have a death cafe, I said, what happens in the death cafe? Turned out the executive director was an expert on end of life issues. When you are a girl and you're 11 and you were in my generation and I just turned 77, you got a book that said, So You're Becoming a Woman. When you're 77, you do not get a book that says, So You're Becoming an Older Woman. But you have to build and create your own support system around this. I'm lucky that I have wonderful friends and colleagues. It's an orchestra of talent I have around me, and I learn from every single person. Sometimes we play too hard. I turned 77. I went dancing. You can end up with joint pain. We did a session called Joints and Joints. You know, so
Joints and joints. You're in the Bay Area, so I'm thinking that maybe it may be that herbal joint, right?
Well, when you have joint pain, there's a wide swath of things. So
right.
I just happen to think that mobility and memory are two of the biggest categories.
Right.
And what happens in your 80s, and this is why the market opportunity is so exciting, is because you have more chronic conditions in your 80s than any other. It only goes up from there. So managing chronic conditions and being the trusted guide to manage those chronic conditions is what people need help with. And that's where people are innovating. So in our business plan competition, 10 years out of the 20 years, biodesign won because uncontrolled tremor is a big market. So in the category of mobility, Neuroscientists won a couple of years ago, which gives you stimulation in your neck. There's a senior housing group in Cupertino that the foundation voted to have that come in. So if we can place Able Care and Neuroscientists and Centaur Robotics, the wheelchair of the future, that's already in airports and in park services, everybody's going to want to have these things. And I want to say something about the setting of my chair. I was sitting in the wrong chair for 4 years. And it wasn't until I went dancing that I realized that I had not paid attention to the ergonomics of my own home. And so Lawrence Tannenbaum is absolutely right. But Kohler's coming into this market. You're going to see more corporations coming into the market. We're very excited. I mean, nobody's done a better job of this than the Age Tech Collaborative and Andy Miller and Amelia Hay, because they've assembled all of these companies coming into the market. But I think that affordable housing has a huge opportunity. In fact, I'm meeting with the city of Oakland, one of the housing groups, because if we're going to do better lighting, you could just walk through room to room to room and say, functionally, how could the house be improved?
Right.
But we don't have enough geriatric care managers. We don't have enough caregivers. We don't have enough trained caregivers. I'm very excited that St. Mary's College in Moraga has put together a new nursing school, that Gordon Moore's Foundation, Betty Moore's Foundation, has given $100 million to UC Davis, to the nursing school, and that we're having these innovators work with these schools of nursing. It turns out physical therapist turns out to be a really important part of the ecosystem. How many of your clients need physical therapy?
Well, I would say the majority of mine do. And it goes right back to your point about mobility and brain health. They're, the two biggest factors. And, I love the fact that you talked about the fact that 80-year-olds and older have these comorbidities. And that's it's just a byproduct of aging. And when you look at our population between now and 2050, the 65-year-old population is doubling, and the 85-year-old population is going to nearly quadruple. So, Mary, you're on the front line there. You're trying to innovate, bring technology and innovation to this senior living world so that we can be able to help these folks. But the one thing that most people don't realize, and I know you know this, that 1/3 of our population, 65 and older, is solo aging. And that means there's nobody there with them. And the average distance for an adult child with a parent that may be solo aging is about 280 miles. So they're not, the concept of a nuclear family doesn't exist anymore. And that's because of the advent of technology and travel. Children have left the nest, or the parents have moved to warmer climates to retire. So, I mean, we've got, a huge conundrum. And you talked about affordable housing, not only for seniors, but, for where you live, to find caregivers to come to the Bay Area. They can't live in the Bay Area because they can't afford housing there. So they're traveling, an hour to maybe even 2 hours to get there. So, I mean, these are some of the challenges. And I'm so glad you brought up Neurosantis. I know you know Scott Stanley, who's a good friend of mine. He's utilizing them and getting great outcomes. And certainly, some of the other companies that you have talked to me about, he and others are using. So there's a lot of innovation that is happening in this space, and it's really an exciting time.
The smartest thing that people in healthcare and home care and senior housing could do is take the top 1/8 quartile of entrepreneurs that are showing efficacy with older adults. And so, someone very close to me had stroke. Um, I'm helping them with hearing and some of these other issues. Balance is now an issue. Accelera in Maine has done an amazing job with their go-to-market strategy. So when you see traction on the part of the customer, so if you take the issues, early stage dementia, a lot of people providing home care are dealing with people with early stage dementia. The Aegis Innovation Pets are a really important part of the solution, as are intuition robotics and the amount of engagement they're getting. So you really have to look at the data. Nobody understands that better than Sarita Mohanty, the Scan Health Foundation. So what can I say? At one point in time in my career, there was a magazine called Upside, not here anymore, and it was all the tech people. They put us all in the orchestra, and Andrew Grove was leading the orchestra. I was in the tuba. I kind of think what's happening now is there's an orchestra of talent that is building the longevity marketplace. And those people who want to build companies that win, really win, they will embrace the right technology solutions from the get-go. And really, it would be smart to come to our conference because we're going to have a lot of them there. And when you watch like Courtney Baldridge do due diligence on what innovations should USA aging roll out, and she chooses, Better Age with Jim Furman and Diana Yen, it's interesting that that got chosen. It's interesting that NIA has funded Beth Saunders and Life Bio. I just joined the advisory board of Life Bio. And so helping people tell their story. My friend Myrna is writing a lot about older women. This is the market to watch. I'm very excited about where we're going. If you think that you're going to take the spirit out of us when we're 77, when we had so much fun when we were 17, we're going to date again. We're going to use AI to find out what kind of skin cream to use. We're going to be as they say in the venture world, kicking ass, taking names,
I love it.
but we're going to make a difference. This is what the boomers were about. That's why you see so many businesses that boomers are building, but they want adventure, they want romance. The dessert of life is time with their grandchildren. So part of the reason they're going to do core strength training is because they want to keep up. They're going to travel, they're going to give back.
Oh, I love
This
it.
was the promise of who the boomers are. If you really understand those boomers, and in terms of caregiving, a lot of boomers did the journey. My colleague, Pat Stenson, was a caregiver for her mother for 40 years. She's 102. She's why our clients like her, because she loves the market. She understands the market. I have another close friend that just lost her partner. She would be a perfect caregiver. So, one of the things you get with older adults helping other older adults is more loyalty for your home care organization. And I want to say something to the young people out there. If you're listening, come volunteer at our conference. If you can understand this market and you understand the AI market and the digital market, you're going to be much better off in your career, because this isn't just a market in the US, it's a market in China. We're going to have a conference in Europe connected to the fashion. I mean, people think I'm going into senior living, what should I pay attention to? Fashion. That is the first thing to pay attention to. That's why Nordstrom's does fashion shows. It's why people go to 3 meals a day. They notice what you're wearing. It's people don't want to say you look healthy. They want to say you look sexy. You look
I love it.
vital.
I love it.
You look like Myrna and I wanted to create a business called Still Fab. You're still fabulous. We just want to feel
I
fabulous,
love
right?
it. Oh, absolutely.
And pain free. And for everybody that was a quarterback, I was the rally commissioner. This is who we are now, right? This is fun, Bob, right? Right from the living room on our home.
You know what? It is. And it's so much fun having you here on the show. And I do have one last question, but before I ask it, I would love for you to give our listeners how they can learn more about MFA and these conferences. How do we find this? And for the young listeners, if they want to volunteer, how do they do this as well?
Well, they can always email me at furlong@aol.com.
And that's
Or go,
FURLONG at
right.
AOL.com.
They should probably follow us on LinkedIn. We've just upgraded our LinkedIn executive presence. And any
I
of your
love it.
executives, if you want to upgrade your executive presence, mine's gotten to over 16,000 followers. Ask us how.
Wow.
Our website is maryfurlong.com. Our newsletter comes out once a month. Um, and so the best thing is to go to the website, and then also to, if you want to get into this market, go listen to our podcast. If you watch, I've had entrepreneurs come up to me and say, I've watched every Deal Talk podcast. I now know why Honor bought Home Instead. So you can find a lot of the deals by watching the podcast. But really, what you want, the ecosystem changes every conference. So you want your logo on our conference in DC, because one of the state directors on aging who's done 32 deals with entrepreneurs told me this is the most important conference you've ever done, because the stakes have never been higher. So you want to go look at our events and see who's at the events. And then we're already starting to program for June. And so we'll have we'll have an investor track there. So if you're an angel, a seed, a social impact, a corporate investor, we have one of the largest databases of investors. But more importantly, we know that Carl Hirschman, what he's investing in, we know what AARP, Age Tech is investing in. We know what Ziegler's investing in, because we've been working with them for 10 years.
Right.
So we have a sense of what are the investment theses. And then if you have an idea, go ahead and apply to the competition. And so maryfurlong.com is where we post everything. And I'm privileged. It's not just me. I have an amazing team of people. They've been with me for over a decade. And many of the people that I worked with years ago have come back and still work with us. For example, Natasha, who was a finalist in our competition, or Posit Science, we've been working with for 22 years, Silver Ride, 22 years.
I love it.
We're long-term relationship builders.
I love it. And I want to say this, the stakes have never been higher. I really believe that the problem solve that we have ahead of us on how we're going to care for this older adult population is not only the greatest problem solve of our generation, it may be the greatest problem solve of humanity. We've never aged like we are today. And Mary, I'm proud to have you as a friend and as a person that's blazing the trail and really helping all of us age as best as we can with as little deficits as we can and making the most out of our days. I want to conclude. Go ahead.
I want to just respond a little bit. I don't think we touched enough on the caregiver shortage crisis. I think that there's an opportunity to think differently about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I give a colleague of mine, Greg Shabrier, who lives in the Villages in Florida, credit for this idea, because I had a couple of students in my class, and he said to the students, "Where are you from?" And the students told him they were from the Philippines. There were 4 students. He said, "Have you ever been to Yosemite?" And he said, "No." And he told the other students, "One of you ought to take these students to Yosemite." And then I began to see that even in my own class at Santa Clara, that I had students from around the world, and that this is a global problem. So if you look at cultures around the world that could develop PT, OT, nursing, caregiver training, and partner with some of the universities here, I think there's an opportunity to build a deeper, better workforce in caregiving. And I think that there should be, Sherry Snelling talks a lot about this at the Caregiving Club. I think there needs to be pathways to continued learning in caregiving. And so we need to make caregiving a profession as noble as law. And I think that it's thinking about one of the things that I have found that my team needs is flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
If you offer in the workplace flexibility to moms, to caregivers, and so many, 65% now are caregivers. And it often switches. One time you're the caregiver for your spouse, your sister, and then they're the caregiver for you. So the caregiving needs to be one of the Chronicle. It still exists. I get it in paper. But at one point in 1980, they said SeniorNet is a word for the next decade. Caregiving is the word for 2030 to 2040.
100%.
2040 to 2050. So coming up with a strategy around how to, and there are people doing this. Jeremy Hamill in Denver is one, the tech-enabled home care of the future. How can that happen? But it's partly a workforce initiative, and we ought to embrace that. I love it when I meet a nanny that's kicking it and making it really wonderful for a family and children. I'd love to see the same kind of training and support for international caregiving and view caregiving as an economic development opportunity.
100%. I'm 100% with you. And, my good friend, Ben Lytle, who is a potentialist, a futurist, he wrote the book, The Potentialist. He's a futurist and the founder of Anthem. He describes, because you and I are boomers, he describes that our workforce of today and into the future is going to be boomers. And boomers are going to work 2 to 3 day work weeks. They need purpose. They don't want to completely retire, but they want to be out there in the workforce and having purpose. And there is no better purpose than helping your fellow mankind, womankind, and helping them through this journey called aging. So I think part of that problem solve is really leaning on our generation to really help our neighbors and our friends out and really help them age in the best they can. And also you talked about these cultures. I mean, these cultures that you're referring to, they're caring cultures, and they want to be able to provide care, especially in this country. And immigration should not be a dirty word. We need to really open up our visas for caring cultures to really help our older adults age as best they can.
I'll tell you a funny story. I had a friend come over, and she's 77 too, and she has hip issues too, or knee issues, and she's from the UK, and we had tea, and I gave her a little birthday party. It was fun.
I love it.
She brought me some sausage rolls last week. We had a cup of tea. She just sold her business, and she said to me, "I want to work for you as a virtual assistant." I said, "That would be great. I'm moving." I said, "That doesn't matter where you live. Our webmaster's in Bulgaria." And she said, she asked me more about what we did. And she said, I think you shouldn't try to sell your business. I think you should let the employees take it over. So I don't have employees, I just have contractors. But it's so interesting to me that there was only one line. I've been at 4 White House conferences on aging. One line I remember got a standing ovation. Older people need a vision of the future, not just a memory of the past. I love that she saw my company could be part of her vision of
Wow.
the future. And I'm so privileged to work with like Fred Fishkin at my podcast co-host and our conference team. It's a privilege to spend your time doing those kinds of things. And it's been a privilege to be here with you today.
Well, thank you. And as we wrap up, I just want to ask you, is there a question I haven't asked, or is there some lasting leaving thought you want to leave our listeners as we close up the show?
I had the privilege of being on one of the world's best cruise ships, giving 3 talks, one on longevity, one on mobility, and one on caregiving. And one of the things I noticed on that cruise ship is that it was the best beauty salon. The ergonomics were like PS salon. It was the best nutrition and food. It was the best socialization. There was tea, there were lectures. Why not bring the best into our communities? And I really think it's like nutrition, it's what is the Sesame Street curriculum for the boomers today? And how can home care and healthcare, senior housing, how can we all become that generation of revolutionaries? We know that boomers like to make changes, that is what we grew up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were going to change the world. And then we forgot. In my book, I said we cut our hair, went to work. 30 years later, where are we? So now we're ready to change it again. But why not change it for the better? So I think that the longevity movement today is like the Impressionists. We're painting in these different places. We need to showcase the work of everybody.
I love it. Mary Furlong, it's such a pleasure to have you here in the studio with me, and I look forward to seeing you again. I'm going to look at these sessions that you have, these conferences. I definitely want to be a fly on the wall in one of those. It sounds like that's where a lot of the imagination or reimagination is in terms of how we look at aging today and into the future. You've been listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You, and I've had this incredible guest, somebody I've been wanting to have on the show for a long time, Mary Furlong. Thank you for joining me. Make it a great day. Have a great week. We'll be back next Friday. Thanks for listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm Bob Roth, reminding you that living well isn't just about years, it's about the quality of life and connections. Follow and share the show, and join us next time for more on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life.